It is another episode of the Juice on the Cuse Podcast. Wes Cheng alongside Brad Bierman. Thanks so much for joining us on this Friday, February 6, 2026. So much to talk about as always. And we begin today's show with the basketball team. Brad, they will play at number 18 Virginia tomorrow at noon on ESPN. What do you think of the Orange heading into this matchup, Brad?
Well, Wes, it's certainly been a great experience for me personally covering the team games in North Carolina and Atlanta the last 8 weeks or so. And it's given me an opportunity to get a glimpse of this team from behind the scenes and kind of try to get a feel of what's the makeup of this team. We all see what's happened on the court. We've all seen the ups and downs. We've all heard Coach Red after every game uttering basically the same things. We've now heard the players basically after every game uttering the same thing. Some of the players aren't talking to the media after games now. So it's really interesting when you see the team come out an hour and a half before a game, go through all those workouts and warm-ups. And interesting to see this team after a game when they're meeting up with family and friends, especially on the road, and watching the interaction between the coaching staff, the staff itself, and the players and their parents and family. Really interesting. So it really makes me wonder if everything we're hearing in these post-game press conferences is rubbing off in practices and subsequently in the games. I don't think so. So what's my point? My point is we can talk until the end of the day, every day about the team, but they've got to perform. They've got to win games, and it's not what they're doing. So when you ask about going into Virginia after just watching them play in Chapel Hill this past Monday and having watched them play in Raleigh the week before, you have to wonder on the road when these atmospheres for these other teams and the scouting by the opponents, these are great athletes going up against each other. So it's going to be tough. They've only won once there in Charlottesville in ACC play. Noon tip-off. It's going to be the usual loud crowd there. Can they do it? Sure, they can pull off an upset, but it's going to be really up to the players. You know, they talked about it after a Monday night. You know, we have great practices. It doesn't translate to the games. Well, it's got to translate to the games, just like that second half spurt did this past Monday. So there it is, a little long-winded, Wes, but it's been really an up and down ride, and it's really up to these guys who are getting paid to perform. Now it's time to perform, especially, this game, what he got to lose, and then going home next week for Cal and SMU.
Yeah, so Brad, I think the majority of the fan base probably has given up on the season, and of course it makes sense. Syracuse is 13-10. They had NCAA Tournament aspirations, but I wanted to talk about Virginia, of course, as the topic is, and also the remaining schedule. So just looking ahead, if Syracuse takes care of business in home matchups against Cal, SMU, and Pitt, and then wins one on the road against Wake Forest, those are winnable games. That would put them at 17 wins, and Wake Forest inside the top 75 of net. So that would be currently a quad one win on the road at the moment. So that leaves quad one games against Virginia that we're talking about on Saturday, on the road at Duke, hosting UNC in Louisville. They'll need to split probably 2 of those 4 games to get to 19-12 heading into the ACC tournament. Our colleague Martin McCarthy wrote about this earlier today. I would put the chances of this around 5%. And I think that's the path that Syracuse would need to walk to get back into the conversation for an NCAA tournament berth and get back in the bubble discussion. So the opportunity is there against Virginia tomorrow. The margin is slim. I don't think they're going to win at Duke. Duke being Duke as always. Hosting UNC seems like a possibility, and at Louisville, it seems like a very tall order. And they're talking about hosting a UNC team that was up by as many as 31 points after halftime. So do I think it's likely? No. Is the path there? Yes, but it's very, very, very limited.
So let me ask you this question, Wes. I love Martin's analysis and his stories, really positive, glass half full look at the team. But what makes you think this team has the ability to do what we're talking about here for the rest of the season when we've kind of been talking about it really since the Clemson game on New Year's Eve started the ACC season?
Well, they've shown flashes of it, right, Brad? We actually saw one of the best offensive performances from the team just 2 games ago against Notre Dame. So the talent is there. They have Donnie Freeman. They have JJ Starling, who are all ACC caliber players. The talent has been there on the roster. And you keep saying it, they have good practices. At some point, you have to think that translates into a game. Again, do I think that's going to happen? I mark it at around 5%. So the answer is probably not. But there's still plenty of basketball left to be played. And there is a path forward to getting back into the NCAA bubble discussion. Brad, I wanted to pivot to the football team. They're coming off 2 consecutive weekends of hosting recruits on campus for junior days as we inch towards spring practice and getting a look at how this roster is going to gel for the 2026 season. What are you seeing for the football team?
Well, first of all, Wes, I really like the offseason additions from the coaching staff. I really think coaching as a theme here is so important, not only for football, as we're talking now, but as we alluded to with basketball and all that's gone on there, and will be for lacrosse. We'll get to that. But coaching, and I really like the additions to the staff because I do think the talent obviously has been upgraded now in the 3 recruiting cycles in the Fran Brown era. But I think these players need to be properly coached and developed to make contributions to the program on the field. So I do like the coaching additions, some veteran coaches. I hope none are poached here before the NFL coaching carousel kind of ends after the Super Bowl, of course. But and then you hope for not a lot of injuries because the depth is, while it's being built, it's still not quite there, I think, to be in the upper echelon of the ACC. All eyes will be on, of course, the rehab of Steve Angeli. Not going to really be able to do a lot in the spring, but I really still have question marks about the lines and about the depth. And that comes back to, NIL payment, how that's all working out and getting players into the program. I think they're doing as best as they can in the portal. I think they've done a great job scholastically, as you know, and I think the depth is there. But it's time for players to break out, and there's time for there to be consistency on all 3 units.
Yeah, Brad, a couple decommitments in recent days from the 2027 class. We've covered that on Syracuse Orange on SI. I think the main thing that you alluded to that I'm paying attention to is the coaching staff. The Orange hired Juan Castillo, and I think this is the person you're talking about, to be their offensive line coach in January. And by all accounts, that is a home run hire for the Orange. He's been in and out of the NFL and the college ranks for over 40 years. And I've had a chance to speak to some of the recruits who have met with them during their junior day visits. They all rave about his acumen and his history of being around the game for that long. But as with hiring coaches that are in demand and have been around for a while, they're in demand for a reason. So they're, to your point, there are reports out there that Jim Harbaugh interested in hiring Juan Castillo for the New York Giants offensive line coach position. And if you talk about stability, it would be good to have Castillo there for at least a season as both a recruiter and bringing that 40 plus years of knowledge to an offensive line that's really struggled in 2025. One note I wanted to talk to you about the portal. The strategy was really clear in the portal, right, Brad? They were taking 4- and 5-star recruits from previous cycles that didn't really pan out at their schools that Syracuse had recruited. They're saying, hey, you have the talent. We recruited you in high school. I don't think much has changed. Why don't you come over here? You get a reset of scenery. You get an opportunity for playing time. That is a strategy they seem to have adopted. They bought low on the stock rather than trying to buy high on the stock. And that's a strategy you have to have without having the budget that an Alabama or a Michigan has. You have to buy low and hope that you can coach them up into a high stock.
To the point of that strategy goes right into what we're talking about, coaching and developing these players who did have the accolades as they came out of high school going into college, didn't pan out for whatever reason where they initially went. And as you just said, Syracuse strategy to come in there and see what they can do. But that's coaching. That's development. That's also mental fortitude on the part of the player. I want to add a note about Castillo. He was definitely a home run hire, spent a lot of time in Philadelphia when he was with the Eagles. One of the best, in his era, coaching the offensive line, plain and simple. So when I saw that, Fran Brown was able to get someone, again, through his connections in the Camden, Philadelphia area to come up to coach at Syracuse in the twilight of his career, great. Hope they can keep him. But ironically, Jeff Stoutland, another former Eagle coach and another former Orange coach, may be available because he's not returning to Nick Sirianni's staff. So I think you can get good coaches still at this point. But, yeah, you hate to lose anybody that's been working with your team.
So, Brad, let's move to the third of the big three sports at Syracuse. The lacrosse team taking on St. Joseph's tomorrow at the JMA Wireless Dome, looking to move to 2-0. What are you looking for from the Orange as they head into this game?
Well, first, a little bit of a boo there. Why did they schedule the lacrosse game the same time as the basketball game? Doesn't make sense at noon. This could have been a 2:00 game in the Dome. St. Joseph's doesn't play for another week, either to Syracuse. So anyway, I'll have both screens going there. But I thought the Syracuse lacrosse schedule works out just like I always say about basketball and football. Start with an opponent that's going to test you, not a superstar team coming into the Dome, as was the case against BU. And I thought that game was good to start to get some of the wrinkles out, if you will, in terms of turnovers and gelling and some of the new players that have come into the program. And this lines up great, too, for St. Joseph's, a team that has a new head coach and is also finding its way. So I really do like how the schedule early on here has these two games with Maryland next before the 6 on the road. Don't like that. But the players that are expecting to perform in the first game have performed, starting at the center spot with Mullen and going back to the goalie. So let's see what happens here. But after one game, like what I see and see how the team develops here into game 2.
Yeah, you're right about the scheduling. I don't know why they put it against the basketball game, but in terms of the schedule itself, you're right. It's good to have this tune-up before they head into the gauntlet, because if you look at their next 5 games, Maryland, Harvard, Princeton, Penn, Johns Hopkins, Gary Gait knew that his team was ready for it. And this is, the first major recruiting class he brought in was headlined by Joey Spallina. They're all seniors now, and you have an elite defense, one of the best goalies in the business. You mentioned it in Jimmy McCool between the pipes. They're going to get those extra reps in a live setting against St. Joseph's, and then we're really going to see what this team is made of. And I think by the end of February, early March, when you get through those next 5 games, we're going to get a really strong idea of who this team is and if this is the team that can get Syracuse back to the national championship that they haven't had since 2009.
I agree, Wes. They got the taste of it last year, which I think is a good thing now for this team. Mixed with the schedule you just alluded to, I think is the right combination to be playing best lacrosse that this team can be by May.
Brad, we're right at the end of our show. You got a closing thought for us?
Where did you go National Signing Day, Wes? You know, as a recruiter day in and day out, that we used to look so much forward to that first Wednesday in February. And now, of course, it's all changed, the whole landscape of college football. I say kind of boo to that because that used to be kind of like the Super Bowl of recruiting in college football. We so much look forward to that. I'll age myself here in the 90s, early 2000s, of course. But it's all in good fun now as the calendars change and there's excitement in the fall for recruiting leading into the early signing period in December. But just want to say we miss you. First Wednesday in February and the National Signing Day.
And Syracuse wasn't quiet. They did pick up another 2026 signee. So that was certainly good for the Orange in the February signing period. And Brad, my closing thought, about a 2-hour drive from Syracuse is the Siena men's basketball team led by Jerry McNamara. The longtime player and coach of the Orange has his team tied for second in the MAC, 16-7 overall, 9-3 in conference play. They'll host Iona with a shot of making 6 straight wins. And keep in mind, when McNamara arrived at Siena 2 years ago, he was taking over a 4-win team. And I think there's a lot of mixed reactions on social media about McNamara potentially coming back as a coaching candidate for Syracuse in the future. But regardless of what you think, Siena's playing meaningful basketball games in February. That's impressive for a team that hasn't made the NCAA tournament since 2010.
If you think about it too, Wes, so that's what he was hired to do, right? Exactly. I don't know if you could say the timetable of 2 years, 3 years, but that's what he was hired to do. We know he's a basketball gym rat for his whole life and would morph into being a good college coach. And that's what he's shown so far in turning that program around to a winning record at this point.
And let's see if Siena can make the NCAA tournament as well. That's it for us. For Brad Bierman, this is Wes Cheng. You've been listening to the Juice on the Cuse podcast presented by On SI and Bleav, and we will see you next time.